It's the hottest new Beach Boys single. Bull Session with Big Daddy back with Denny's drums. Yeah, it's gonna go platinum. Yeah, thanks. I'll send you over a promo. Another successful deal scored. So today we're going to jump into the 1980s. We talked about the Good Vibrations 1975 album last time in the series, and then from 1976 to 1980 there were no new major Beach Boys hits packages released. Instead, the group was embarking on making new studio material, albums like 15 Big Ones and Love You, which we'll talk about throughout today, because our next album from 1981 is 10 Years of Harmony, a showcase of their 1970s output, complete with a gatefold. 10 Years of Harmony covers all of the albums between 1970 and 1980, and despite being out of print and kind of forgotten today, it did leave quite a legacy for the group, which we'll get into today. Now, because this is such a long video, I have a lot to say about 10 Years of Harmony. I'm going to split this episode into two separate pieces. Today we'll cover the first album and a few other odds and ends like the events leading up to this, and then next time we'll focus on the second LP. We'll talk about the CD and the cassette and the mixing differences, because 10 Years of Harmony, quite a bit to cover. Something like Endless Summer speaks for itself. 10 Years of Harmony, not so much. So you might remember, if you saw my 4th of July video, the Beach Boys released what would be their last studio album for a while in 1980, Keepin' the Summer Alive. And despite being a modest chart success and producing a reasonably well-charting single, peaking about number 80, Keepin' the Summer Alive never really caught on, doesn't have a lasting impact on the group, and there was so much infighting and production difficulties surrounding it that it kind of makes sense that it just sort of drifted away. And the Beach Boys weren't really looking to make another album right away. Dennis Wilson was distancing himself from the group, Mike and Carl considering solo careers, and until their big comeback in 1985, there really wasn't a lot going on in the Beach Boys world, at least not anything successful. There were two big singles in the early 80s. One, released in summer of 1981, was the Beach Boys medley, Capitol re-editing several of their older hits into one groovy song, Back with God Only Knows. This isn't really relevant to our discussion today. We're going to get more into this when we cover the next greatest hits package in our series, 1982 Sunshine Dream. So this is coming, but we got to get through all of 10 Years of Harmony first. The other major success the Beach Boys had was their 1981 single, Come Go With Me. And if you can see that Caribou Records label, you'll know that this single was released to promote the 10 Years of Harmony album. I don't know why Come Go With Me was picked. It was not originally a single like beforehand. It was an album cut. I'm assuming it was to capitalize on the nostalgic trend of the time. The Beach Boys had very much bought into the nostalgia angle by this point. If you watch my 4th of July video, we talk about that too. This was definitely the kind of song they would have done live. The B-side was Don't Go Near the Water, which had been a B-side for Surf's Up in the early 70s. Never really caught on, didn't chart in the 70s or in the 80s. Interesting choice. Cover for the A-side, original for the B-side. Pretty neat single though, and I love that Caribou Records sleeve. We'll talk more about Come Go With Me in the second part of this episode, which will be uploaded next week. Today we're going to start kind of at the beginning, I think. So let's go ahead and talk about how you can get 10 Years of Harmony, because it's no longer in print, it's not available for digital download as far as I'm aware. You have the option of record, cassette, and CD. So we're going to focus on the records today. This album is a complete time capsule of the 70s. Every studio album between 1970 and 1980 gets at least one song. So we have songs from Sunflower, Surf's Up, Carl and the Passions, So Tough, Holland, their big big comeback album from 1976, 15 Big Ones, the most successful LP of the decade for the group. Love You from 1977. Probably their least successful album of the 70s, both commercially and critically, the MIU album from 1978. Here's the LA Light album from 79. And the aforementioned Keepin' the Summer Alive. Every album has at least one song, but they are not evenly dispersed. As we work our way through this track list, we'll kind of see which ones they lean towards, like Surf's Up, and which ones, like Love You and Carl and the Passions, get really short shrift. We also have something from their 1973 live album. I do have the record, but I laid out the CD today. And we get a solo track, which is very rare, something from Dennis Wilson's Pacific Ocean Blue. This one I don't have the LP, I just have the CD. And we get unreleased songs, making it something very different for a hits package. You know, we've seen weird singles and rarities and kind of forgotten tracks, but we've never actually had something that is exclusive to a hits package. There are a few others that do this too, but this one, even today, there are tracks that are solely available on 10 Years of Harmony. So today, as we go through record 1, we'll start by taking a look at the lyric sleeves. We'll come back to these two so you could sing along with your records. This is the sleeve for the first of the LPs. Pretty neat. So today, we'll begin at the beginning with Add Some Music to Your Day from Sunflower. A very worthy choice for an album opener. Quite good. And although it wasn't a huge success as a single, it's definitely stood the test of time, and a song about music, good way to start an album off. Then we have from Love You, Roller Skating Child. Roller Skating Child was part of the group's live set in the late 70s, probably why it's included here. Some of the songs on Love You are a bit awkward. This one a little bit, not too bad, not something, you know, like I Want to Pick You Up, which is a little bit more uncomfortable. It's nice to have it here, and surprisingly it's not too jarring a transition, but this is really the only place besides the Love You album to get Roller Skating Child. After that, from Surf's Up, we have Bruce Johnston's magnum opus, Disney Girls. Probably his most famous Beach Boys song, and next to I Write the Songs, his most famous of all time. A very, very nice choice there. So now we get into something a little more rare. We have the single, It's a Beautiful Day. This was released to promote the film Americathon. Maybe in the next video I'll show my Americathon DVD. Kind of a weird comedy made in the 70s about the future of entertainment. It's different. I don't mind it. It's pretty innocuous, but it's no great classic. The full album version of It's a Beautiful Day is still only available on the soundtrack LP. Maybe in the next video I'll show that one off too. But it's nice to have this here, the 3 minute or 3 minutes and odd single mix there. On Made in California in 2013, which I have around here somewhere, here it is, we have a remix of that single which is extended. But if you want something that's more indicative to the original single version, then 10 Years of Harmony is the way to go. So the first time, and even the text on the lyric sheet, which tells you where all these came from, said, theme from the movie Americathon. So it indicates it is not available on another Beach Boys LP or collection or anything of the kind, because all of these songs, it's indicated where they came from. Following It's a Beautiful Day, we have a little something from Holland. Actually, I'll show you my Sail on Sailor lithograph here. We have the single version of Cal Saga. The single version has extra vocals from Brian Wilson. It's very rare to hear that. Usually we get the album mix. I talk about this in my first Sail on Sailor video. So really nice to have this single mix here. And again, it flows pretty well. You know, we're jumping around a lot of different kinds of songs from different eras, but 10 Years of Harmony, it never feels too jarring. And it's good to have one that was a decent chart hit in the US and a very high charting hit in the UK. To have it here, I like that a lot. Following Cal Saga, we have probably one of the more unusual choices, Won't You Come Out Tonight, from the MIU album. So Won't You Come Out Tonight kind of reminds me of Eddie Hodges' I'm Gonna Knock on Your Door. It has those kind of vibes to it. It was an album track on MIU album. As far as I know, it was never issued as a single, at least in the US. Could have been in other countries. I don't think it was part of the live set either. So something unusual, kind of be there, maybe be a little bit different. And there's more tracks from MIU on here than most people would probably realize. For one of their least popular albums, kind of cool. And then we have what is oddly the sole contribution from Carl and the Passions, which is Marcella, another song that's really come back into favor thanks to Ceylon Sailor. Marcella, always a good listen, probably the most remembered track from Carl and the Passions. Oddly, All This Is That, the big fan favorite, is not featured, nor is You Need a Mess of Help to Stand Alone, which was kind of the lead single. Very strange. So that does us for the first side there. So let's go ahead and take the record out. I'll show you the record here later on. And flip it over. And we start off with their most successful single of the 1970s, their cover of Chuck Berry's Rock and Roll Music. The 10 Years of Harmony album uses the single mix, which has really heavy synthesizers. It's kind of a rough, scratchy sound. Sounds really good. I like it. Weirdly enough, the text on the lyric sheet here actually lists the lyrics to a verse that is not featured in the Beach Boys version originally. You know, don't care to hear him play a tango, not in the mood to hear a mambo. That version, with that third verse, would not be released until Made in California. It's my favorite version of the song. A pity that they did not release it beforehand. That could have been really good for the single. But interesting that it's here in the words, but it's not actually in the song itself. After that we have Going On. Going On is a big fan favorite, and although it did crack the top 100, it was not particularly successful. It was the lead single to Keeping the Summer Alive. Probably this album's, Keeping the Summer Alive's, biggest legacy. It's a really nice song, and it should have been a bigger hit. A lot of fun there. After Going On, we have It's Okay. Also from 15 Big Ones, and their second biggest single of the 1970s. It's Okay, the ultimate summertime ballad, one that is still getting redone today. Mike Love did his solo version for 12 Sides of Summer with Hanson. Brian Wilson did a solo version for the Long Promised Road film. Really fun song, probably my favorite of all their 70s tunes. You know, the definitive song for summer. After that we have the single mix of Cool Cool Water. Cool Cool Water was the closer to Sunflower, but a longer version was used. There are so many different mixes of Cool Cool Water. So the 3-minute mix is on 10 Years of Harmony. This one runs about 5. There are mixes that run a minute, or you know, all this different kind of stuff. It was a song that went through a lot of different stages. It actually dates back to close to the Smile sessions too. So a song that, you know, might have been well liked by fans. It was issued as a single at the time. I believe Forever was the B-side. Forever is not included here, by the way. We'll talk about omissions in the next part of the episode here next week. But pretty interesting stuff, and a nice change in pace. Then we come to San Miguel, and if you can see here on the lyric sheet, San Miguel says underneath, previously unreleased track. So San Miguel makes its debut on here. It wouldn't be too long before it got released again in 1993's 30 Years of Good Vibrations, the 30th anniversary set. We have San Miguel, and indeed, even though it was recorded in late 1969, it's technically an 80s track. And later releases that feature it, such as Feel Flows, which features it prominently, along with the instrumental and some vocal excerpts. Releases like the 60th anniversary 3-CD pack included as well. So for being a rarity that was put on here, probably to help push this album, you know, hey, you haven't heard all these Beach Boys tunes. San Miguel actually kind of lived on, getting released in the 90s and then coming back into vogue in the 2020s. It's really cool to hear it here first, though. And if you look at the text on things like Feel Flows or the Good Vibrations set or whatever, technically it lists it as coming from this album first. Well, Feel Flows might not, but the Sounds of Summer set does, excuse me. After San Miguel, we have their cover of Chuck Berry's School Days. School days, school days, dear old golden rule days. We talked about this in my Covered by the Beach Boys video last week. It was featured on that collection. Intended as a single for Keeping the Summer Alive, but not actually released as one in the US. It was released in some other places with songs like Sunshine and When Girls Get Together as the B-side. The 10 Years of Harmony album uses a limited edition single mix of School Days, and notably for being a little bit shorter and having a school bell sound at the beginning after the a cappella intro. Very, very interesting. And something that makes this LP set kind of a rarity. You know, we've seen those other single versions like How Saga and Rock and Roll Music, but to have one that is virtually exclusive to this release, that is so cool. You know, how fun is that? And there's some words there for you. Other groups, of course, did their covers of School Days, one of the definitive school songs. Next up, a little something from the LA Light album. We have Good Timin', the top 40 single from this LP, and probably their most remembered song from it, though we'll talk more about that in the next episode. Pretty cool to have Good Timin' here. That one, of course, was done live for the 50th anniversary and still has kind of a cool legacy. And then lastly for today, because I don't want to take up too much of your time, Sail On, Sailor closes out that first LP. So not a huge hit upon its first release, becoming kind of more successful as it went, as it was re-released. Sail On, Sailor makes for a fitting close, I think, to the album. Lastly today, take a look at this LP. The Caribou, kind of like dark gray, beige kind of color. And then on the other side, this record is really light. Feels kind of flimsy. But it plays just fine. We got some cool mixes on here. And 10 Years of Harmony is a lot of fun, especially if you're just starting to get into their 1970s catalog. Just starting to kind of learn more about the group's diversity and whatnot. So pretty darn interesting. So that will do it for part 1 of 10 Years of Harmony. Join me next week for part 2. We'll talk about the CD release, the cassette release, and the differences therein, because they didn't just take the album and move it right to CD. I'll show you that Americathon stuff that I neglected to put with my other materials this time. We'll talk about some surprising omissions, like Peggy Sue and Susie Cincinnati. And we'll go through, of course, the second LP and have a little conversation about the history of Come Go With Me. So I'm hoping that you enjoyed today's, and that I will see you next week for this episode, part 2. Figured might as well split it up, do the whole thing justice. So hope you liked it. Hope to see you again soon. Always remember, leave a comment below. I love hearing from you. Until then, my friends, sail on, sailors.